have seen Mud think that, you know, he's really, really famous. And I'm just like, Magic Mike. Magic Mike is the performance. And I said, Matthew McConaughey's going to win an Oscar. And I knew it the second I saw you, like, pressed up in that breakdancing pose, scissor leg. And the camera shooting up your Cobra Cod piece. Yeah. Scissor leg. I said, that man is going to win an Oscar. And I was right.
Yeah. And today we are diving deep into one of Hollywood's most genuinely entertaining human beings. And yes, I said human beings, because that's exactly the point. Anne Hathaway is an Oscar winner. She is a fashion icon. She has graced the covers of Vogue and starred in some of the most beloved films of the last 2 decades. And yet, somehow, someway, the woman cannot get through a single set, a single red carpet, or a single talk show couch without something absolutely, magnificently, chaotically hilarious happening. And we are here for every single second of it. So today, we are counting down the funniest, most unfiltered, most wonderfully clumsy Anne Hathaway moments ever captured on camera. From on-set bloopers that made it into the final cut, to interview meltdowns, to the time she basically crashed a party and had no regrets about it whatsoever. Buckle up. This is going to be a ride. Let's go all the way back to the very beginning. The year is 2001. A young, 20-something Anne Hathaway is playing Mia Thermopolis, the awkward teenage princess, in The Princess Diaries, and she is absolutely nailing the awkward part. A little too well, actually. There is a scene in that film, you know the one, where Mia is walking along the bleachers at her school in San Francisco, chatting away, turning around, and then just completely, spectacularly wipes out. Falls flat. Down she goes. And the most remarkable thing? It was 100% real. Here's what happened behind the scenes. On the day they were filming that sequence, it had rained earlier on set. The bleachers were wet. The crew did their best to dry them off, but apparently not well enough. When Anne turned around during the take, she slipped on a puddle and went down. The cameras kept rolling. And burst out laughing. And director Gary Marshall, the legendary director behind Pretty Woman, Valentine's Day, and The Princess Diaries, watched the playback and said, essentially, that stays in the movie. In a tribute special called The Happy Days of Gary Marshall, and herself recalled what he said, that he was never afraid of the spontaneous moment. If it was good, it was in the movie. He didn't care where it came from. And honestly, that fall is the movie. That clumsy, genuine, giggling tumble is one of the most iconic moments in early 2000s teen cinema. It is exactly what made audiences fall in love with Anne Hathaway in the first place, this complete inability to pretend to be more graceful than she is. What makes this even more extraordinary is that it set a kind of template for Anne's career, a running theme of real, unscripted chaos sneaking its way into her most memorable work. The woman has an almost magnetic relationship with bloopers. They are drawn to her. Or maybe she is drawn to them. Either way, we are all the winners. Fast forward to 2006. Anne Hathaway is on the set of what will become one of the defining fashion films of all time, The Devil Wears Prada. She is playing Andy Sachs, the frazzled junior assistant to the terrifying Miranda Priestly, and her co-star is none other than Meryl Streep, a woman who, legend has it, once made a director cry just by raising an eyebrow. Now, everyone assumed that Meryl Streep would be the immovable force on this set. Ice cold, professional, impenetrable, and for the most part she was. Streep famously told Hathaway on day one of filming, "I think you're perfect for the role. I'm so happy we're going to be working together." Then she paused. "That's the last nice thing I'll say to you." And reportedly, in character as Miranda, it was. But then there was Stanley Tucci. Stanley Tucci, playing the flamboyant art director Nigel, apparently had a gift for cracking everybody up, including Meryl Streep, which is, by any measurement, a Hollywood superpower. The gag reel from The Devil Wears Prada is legendary for this. Watch it and you can see it happening in real time. Tucci delivers one of his gloriously elaborate lines, something about Crisco, a dog leash, a bayonet, a staple gun, and Anne Hathaway is physically fighting not to laugh. Her face is doing that thing where her eyes go wide and she bites the inside of her cheek and she's just barely holding it together. And then she doesn't hold it together. She loses it completely. And the moment and goes, Meryl goes too, these tiny, dignified, almost imperceptible cracks in Miranda Priestly's perfect composure. It is extraordinarily funny precisely because it's so rare. You are watching one of the most controlled performers in film history get undone by Stanley Tucci's delivery of the word bayonet. The coat-throwing sequence also produced multiple takes. Apparently tossing a designer coat with exactly the right casual dismissal is harder than it looks. Who knew? And reportedly had to reshoot several times, and each time the coat landed somewhere increasingly ridiculous. Props to the props department for just rolling with it. All of this matters more in 2026, by the way, because The Devil Wears Prada 2 is currently in production, bringing Hathaway, Streep, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci back together. Which means we are almost certainly in for a whole new generation of bloopers. The set of that sequel must be an absolute circus right now, and honestly, we cannot wait. Speaking of this iconic trio, can we talk about what happened at the 2024 SAG Awards? Because it was genuinely, spectacularly funny, and it did not feel rehearsed for a single second. Meryl Streep took the stage to present an award. She walked up, and immediately, she nearly walked into the microphone stand. Just a small trip, a near stumble. Very human. Very funny. And you could see Anne Hathaway and Emily Blunt watching from off-stage, already losing their composure. Then Streep delivered the bit. She had forgotten her glasses. She had forgotten the envelope. She looked appropriately put upon about the whole situation, very Miranda Priestley, if Miranda Priestley had developed a sudden case of comedic timing. And then Anne and Emily swept onto the stage on either side of her, and the whole thing became this perfect, absurdist, Devil Wears Prada reunion sketch that nobody had quite expected to be as funny as it was. Streep mused about where the character ends and the actor begins. Emily Blunt chirped that Meryl and Miranda Priestley were basically twins. Streep shot back, in character, "I don't think I'm anything like Miranda." And, without missing a beat, delivered Miranda's own line right back at her, "That wasn't a question." The audience was completely delighted. It was one of those moments that felt genuinely spontaneous, even if some of it was planned, because even if the lines were scripted, the energy between these three women was completely real. 18 years after the original film, and the chemistry was still electric. Entertainment Tonight noted at the time that it was the first time the three leads had made a public appearance together in nearly 2 decades. And they spent it cracking each other up in front of an auditorium full of Hollywood's finest. Absolute legends. Now let's talk about the paparazzi situation. Because this is a chapter in Anne Hathaway's life that started out frustrating and somehow ended up being a window into exactly how quick and funny she can be when she's caught off guard. Here is some context. Anne Hathaway has had a genuinely complicated relationship with the press and the paparazzi over the years. Around the time of Les Miserables in 2012, she went through what has since been dubbed, rather cruelly to be honest, the Hathahate phenomenon, where a wave of public negativity swept through tabloids and social media for reasons that, in retrospect, nobody can fully explain. She was too earnest, too enthusiastic at award shows, too grateful. Yes, actually, those were the complaints. In 2024, Norwegian entertainment reporter Kirsty Flaw shared footage of an interview she had done with and during the Les Miserables press tour, and it was, shall we say, a bit tense. One-word answers. Reluctance to engage. Flaw herself described it as top-notch cringe. But here's where it gets interesting, and rather lovely, and Hathaway saw the resurfaced footage, and she reached out. Her publicist forwarded Flaw a personal email from Anne, apologizing and explaining what she had been going through at that time in her career. The stress, the pressure, the relentless negativity. That is not the behavior of a difficult celebrity. That is the behavior of a self-aware, emotionally intelligent person who happens to also be a movie star. And what makes it funny, in a bittersweet way, is the contrast with how Anne handles uncomfortable situations now. On red carpets, in interviews, in candid moments on set. When she's relaxed and in her element. She is absolutely unfiltered and completely hilarious. The paparazzi moments that have been caught on camera in recent years show a woman who has found her footing, who knows exactly how ridiculous the whole celebrity circus is and has decided to just lean into it. One of the most purely, consistently funny Anne Hathaway moments ever recorded is not from a film set or an award show. It's from a talk show, when she told the story of a swimming incident that spiraled. The setup, and had been swimming, and at some point she realized she was struggling to get back. She was just floating there, going, "Okay, I'm going to float for a second. Rest. And then, okay, this isn't working." She was trying not to panic. She was trying to look composed. And then there were photographers nearby. Now, a lesser storyteller would tell this story once and move on. But Anne Hathaway retells it with this escalating, increasingly theatrical energy where she goes from calm narrator to full physical reenactment in about 45 seconds. She's demonstrating her swimming technique. She's showing her facial expression. She's explaining that her face was definitely saying, "I'm not okay," while she was trying to project, "I'm absolutely fine, don't photograph this." And then she asks the host to do a side-by-side comparison, her face then versus her face now. Her face now, of course, is also barely okay. This is what makes the story so funny. She's not performing distress. She's genuinely still a little traumatized by this moment and has chosen to process it by turning it into a 10-minute talk show bit. It works. Okay. This one deserves its own section, its own paragraph, its own trophy. Anne Hathaway was on set somewhere, she's passing the time, and someone pulls out a movie trivia card game. You know the type. And is on a roll. She is absolutely crushing it. She is answering questions she didn't even know she knew. She is surprising herself. She is in the zone. And then comes a question about The Devil Wears Prada. And Anne Hathaway answers, "Emily Blunt." The room goes quiet. It was not Emily Blunt. It was Anne Hathaway. The answer was Anne Hathaway. She was in The Devil Wears Prada. She was the lead of The Devil Wears Prada. And she just completely blanked on her own filmography and handed the starring role to her co-star. The reaction she describes, the laughter, the disbelief, the wait, "It wasn't her, it was me," is genuinely one of the funniest celebrity anecdotes of the last decade. It perfectly captures something true about how brains work under pressure, how muscle memory fails us at the worst possible moments, and also how Anne Hathaway specifically seems to be constitutionally incapable of taking herself too seriously for any extended period of time. Emily Blunt, for what it's worth, was apparently very entertained when she heard about it. Not all of Anne Hathaway's funniest moments involve things going wrong. Sometimes they involve things going very, very right. Specifically, her impression of Matthew McConaughey, which she unveiled on Jimmy Kimmel Live and which is, frankly, eerily accurate. The setup was simple, and had apparently spent enough time around McConaughey on a project to have fully internalized his energy, his cadence, his particular way of holding the universe loosely while leaning back in a chair and enunciating things very slowly and then sometimes very intentionally. She starts doing the impression, and the audience immediately recognizes it. There's this wave of recognition and delight. She does the lean. She does the drawl. She does the thing where he says something that sounds profound but also might just be a description of a Tuesday afternoon. She talks about the Tennessee Titans. She blesses America. She has children and intentionality and a little ball. What makes it so funny is that Anne Hathaway is not a traditional impressionist. She's not doing a technical vocal mimicry performance. She's doing a character study. She's captured the spirit of McConaughey and she's playing it completely straight, which makes it 10 times funnier than if she were winking at the audience. Jimmy Kimmel clearly loves it. The audience clearly loves it. And somewhere, Matthew McConaughey is watching this and probably saying, "That's right. All right, all right, all right." This one is a story and has told publicly, and it is one of those anecdotes that gets funnier every time you hear it. And her husband Adam Schulman were invited to a party. Great. Lovely. They were looking forward to it. And then Anne, responsible person that she is, double-checked the date on her phone and realized, oh no, they had the wrong week. The party was actually the following Sunday. She told Adam. Adam responded with something like, "Thank God you checked." And then Anne, apparently unable to resist the gravitational pull of telling a story to its most embarrassing conclusion, said, "Can you imagine how horribly embarrassing it would have been if we would have just showed up at their house in the middle of a Sunday when there was no party going on?" And then she paused and said, "Yeah, that would be the worst thing. Outside of co-hosting the Oscars with James Franco." Reader, she co-hosted the Oscars with James Franco in 2011, and it became, gently, lovingly, with great affection, one of the most legendarily awkward award shows in recent memory. James Franco was reportedly not entirely present for the experience, in various senses. Anne Hathaway was present for all of it, with the energy of someone who had prepared for a Broadway show and found herself performing it alone in a warehouse. She was game. She was committed. She sang. She changed outfits. She tried. The fact that she references it herself, years later, with this completely deadpan delivery, as the benchmark for personal humiliation, that is what makes this woman genuinely funny. She has made peace with every awkward moment of her career and turned them all into material. That takes a kind of emotional intelligence and self-awareness that is rarer than any acting award. But the story doesn't end there. Because they then went to the party anyway, the wrong week, and the host, being an incredibly good sport, invited them in, got them drinks, and they ended up accidentally crashing a completely different gathering. A surprise party. Anne Hathaway apparently had a wonderful time. One of the most purely delightful Anne Hathaway stories ever told is not a blooper or a clumsy moment. It is just a story about compliments and what happens when Hollywood royalty gets together and decides to be honest. After having her son, and described a moment at some kind of Hollywood gathering where she was feeling, understandably, a bit self-conscious about her body, which had changed after pregnancy. And then, in rapid succession, she got a string of compliments from an unlikely chain of celebrities. First, Sandra Bullock looked up and said, "Looking good, Mama." Then, Cate Blanchett, in full elegant Cate Blanchett mode, said something appreciative about her jeans. And then, Rihanna looked up and said, without any filters, without any Hollywood delicacy, "Damn girl, you got a ass." And Hathaway describes her reaction to this as being simultaneously freaked out and deeply, profoundly moved. Because Rihanna then followed it up with, "You got a ass like me." Which is, objectively, one of the greatest compliments any human being can receive. The way Anne tells this story, the escalation from Sandra Bullock's wholesome mom energy to Cate Blanchett's refined elegance to Rihanna just being completely, magnificently unfiltered, is perfect. It's a 3-act play in about 45 seconds. And it says something genuinely sweet about Anne Hathaway that the Rihanna moment is clearly the one that made her feel best. And Hathaway's blooper history is not limited to The Princess Diaries and The Devil Wears Prada. When she filmed Get Smart in 2008 alongside Steve Carell, she was apparently a one-woman blooper machine. The action comedy format requires a very specific kind of physical performance. You have to be precise enough to hit your marks while also appearing spontaneous and chaotic, because the whole joke of Get Smart is incompetence done with absolute conviction. Anne's character, Agent 99, was supposed to be the competent one, which made any unexpected physical chaos on set doubly funny. Wire work, in particular, seems to have provided and with significant opportunities for things to go sideways. When you are literally suspended 80 feet in the air and your job is to look like a trained secret agent, and instead you are doing a one-legged stand that devolves into someone putting music on and everyone laughing, that is a blooper. That is a beautiful, irreplaceable blooper. The physical comedy that emerges from these moments is not accidental. And Hathaway has a genuine gift for committed physical performance. She throws herself at things completely, and when that commitment meets an unexpected obstacle, the result is almost always gold. And finally, in perhaps the most universally relatable development in Anne Hathaway's recent public life, her son, Jonathan Rosebanks Shulman, born in 2016, is apparently entirely unimpressed by his mother. Specifically, he does not like her singing, and has a beautiful voice. She sang in Les Miserables. She has performed on Broadway. She has decades of vocal training. And her child has looked at all of that and gone, "No thank you. Not interested. Please stop." There is something cosmically funny about this. You can spend 20 years earning critical acclaim for your vocal performances, and then a small human who shares your DNA will cut you down to size without a second thought. He doesn't do it cruelly. He just clearly has opinions, and those opinions do not include, "Yes, please sing to me, mother." And tells this story with complete, loving bewilderment, the kind of bewilderment that comes from being thoroughly humbled by someone who is 3 feet tall. And it connects back to something that runs through every single one of these stories, every blooper, every awkward moment, every crashed party and swimming incident and forgotten film credit. And Hathaway is, at her core, someone who does not take herself too seriously. And in an industry that can turn a person into a self-mythology very quickly, that is genuinely remarkable. The bloopers are funny because they're real. The stories are funny because she tells them on herself. The whole thing works because she is, underneath the awards and the fashion and the icon status, just a person who falls down on bleachers and forgets she was in The Devil Wears Prada and crashes parties and can't get out of the ocean. And honestly, that's the best thing about her. Plus. So there you have it, some of the absolute best, most wonderfully chaotic, genuinely hilarious Anne Hathaway moments ever put on film or described on a talk show couch. From the Princess Diaries slip that became movie magic, to the SAG Awards reunion, to the Rihanna compliment that changed her life, this woman is a genuine gift to the comedy content of the universe, even when she's not trying to be. Especially when she's not trying to be. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, drop a comment telling us your absolute favorite Anne Hathaway moment, and subscribe if you haven't already. We're doing these breakdowns every week, and next time, we're going somewhere you are not going to expect.